Hello learners, in this unit related to Indian society, we will understand and discuss the structure of Indian society through historical times. After watching this video, you will be able to gain knowledge about the structure of Indian society during ancient period, the social structure during the medieval time period, the evolution of major social institutions in these two time periods, the important phases of social transformation in Indian society. So, with these objectives in mind, let us now understand the overall changes in the Indian society. In the previous units, you have learned about the way Indian culture has emerged. In this session, you will study and learn about the social life during the early Rigvedic period of ancient India and its different phases of change throughout the later Vedic period. You will also see how the social institutions which emerged during this period were later transformed and became more rigid due to changes in the economy and political organization of society. This took place during the post-Vedic period when social codes were more rigidly defined through the composition of epics and Puranas. I hope you are aware about epics such as Ramayana and Mahabharata, which were composed during this period, and they tell us about the socio-cultural and political norms of the society. The social rigidity and orthodoxy which developed in the society during this period led to a number of reform movements in the society. It gave birth to cultural movements such as Buddhism and Jainism, which revolted against the Vedic cult and the rigid caste hierarchy. They also opposed the prevalent socio and cultural exploitation. So, in this lecture, we will be studying basically the influence of these movements and the revival of Hinduism, as well as at this time Manu, who has authored the Manav Dharam Shastra, the law code of Hindu social organization, which influenced the overall social structure. This period also led to the rise of mercantile groups, expansion in trade and growth of handicraft and urban settlements. This unit also offers you a perspective that how throughout the period of Indian social history, various transformation took place due to regionalism of Indian polity and disintegration of empires during the Mauryan period. It was in this period that the political and cultural contact began with outside world, and it led to the establishment of kingdoms by the Turks and Mughals in India. So, we will learn about the impact of the historical developments on the social and economic institutions of society. So, learners, now let us first study what was the structure of Indian society during Vedic period. The Vedic society is further subdivided into two divisions, the early Vedic and the later Vedic society. The early Vedic society was largely based on pastoral economy and comprised of group of households linked by descent or kingship bonds. Sets of different lineages comprised a social community. It represented an interdependent network of clans. This community, being a pastoral economy, had to move about. In the sense, it functioned like roaming tribal bands. The key element of social organization was household and tribal bands. The members of this society were of fair complexion. They were skilled in the art of cattle raising and they worshipped natural elements, primarily fire. They are called Aryans, and being migratory people, they often clashed with the native inhabitants where they migrated. The Aryans seems to celebrate predatory powers. They were prone to attacks and were also in constant clash with dark complexions, dasas. They used to capture them during warfare and use them as slaves. Many Indologists are of the opinion that Dasas were descendants from the Harappan civilization, which was urbanized and consisted of number of settlements. The fear of the Aryans drove these people to take shelter in the Vindhyachal area. The Aryans characterized the Dasas as dwellers of caves and darkness. So, therefore, the social structure of the early Vedic society, which resulted from this contact, got divided between two groups, the Aryans and the Dasas. The Aryans during this time did not seem to have developed any internal social stratification or rigid division of labor. The Aryan society was more egalitarian. The occupations, whether priesthood or warrior, was adopted by choice and was interchangeable. A priest could become a warrior and vice versa. But there was a rigid social gradation that existed between the Aryans and the Dasas, and it was of a very exploitative nature. The Rig Veda also has a mention of people called the Pani, who were portrayed as rich cattle breeders and traders. These were non-Aryans and are mentioned as having dark. They did not observe the Aryan rituals or sacrifices and conducted trade and commerce through exchange. The Aryans used to plunder the Panis and set fire their settlements. They used to enslave them and call them also as Dasas. Since both Dasas and Panis are reported to have Proto-Australite features, one could envisage similarities between the two categories of people. It seems that the interaction between the Pani Dasa social segment with the Aryans slowly began to give rise to the elementary features of social stratification, which was based on the distinction of Varna or color, which had racial characteristics also. However, the institution had not fully emerged during the early Vedic period. Now, let us study the later Vedic period. Significant changes in the social structure, cultural roles, and division of labor came into existence during the later Vedic period. The fourfold division of caste, which is known as jatis, the Brahmana, also known as priest, the Rajya, rulers or Kshatriyas, the Vaishya, the traders, and Shudras, the peasant, is referred to have originated from the body of the Purusha, the great being, in the Puruk Sukta of the Rig Veda, which had its origin during this time. Thus, there was a differentiated social hierarchy that seems to have emerged during the later Vedic period, which further got consolidated during the epic period. Social disabilities of the lower strata, particularly of the Shudra, in regard to the access to sacred texts or their recitation, was strictly imposed. The interchangeability of occupation by voluntary choice was restricted to the upper segment of the social strata. The priest also lost his generic role in the society based on voluntary charitable roles such as exponent of military strategy, craft, or literary work. Their role was confined to presiding over rituals and sacrifices. The rationalization of Varna hierarchy was achieved through the sacrament or initiation of Yagopavit, a sacred ceremony. It was allowed only in the case of the first three Varnas. The codification of rigid norms of social and ritual practices, which were rooted on the basis of discrimination by the upper Varnas, took place during this later Vedic period. The composition of Griha Sutras and Dharam Sutras were completed, and in these sutras only the first three levels of the social strata were allowed to access them, and various privileges were available to the upper Varnas. Therefore, we have studied so far that the society was divided into various divisions and was based on the concept of Vedic scriptures. Now, let us study the role of family. The Vedic society had family and lineage as the two basic elements of its social organization. Most of the rituals and religious activities of the Aryans, such as the household sacraments related to life cycle events, for example, birth, initiation, marriage, death, etc. The sacrificial rituals were there to appease the god for the acquisition of magical powers, to meet the challenges of nature, and to defeat the enemies, were all centered around the household or the clan. The Griha Sutra and Dharam Sutras prescribed number of rituals and sacrifices and their normative principles. The head of the household had a very special role in performing these rituals, and he was often asked to preside over. The term used for family in the Veda is Grihe, and the head of the household is called Grihapati. God Agni or fire had a preeminent place in these sacramental rituals of the household, so much so that at times Agni or the god of fire was called the Grihapati, and the sacred fire in the household was known as the Grihapati. Most sacramental rituals in the family had the god of fire as its main deity, and the Griha Sutras illustrate this relationship. The structure of the family during the early period was that of a nuclear or an elementary tribe having members not of more than 2 generations. The family had its network with the clan. During the later Vedic period, there is an evidence of the existence of joint family system. This may be indirectly related to settled agriculture, pastoral economy, and changing social composition during the process of agricultural production. The authority system in the family used to be largely based on the role of the father. However, there was a greater degree of gender equality and participation of both parents in family rituals and various activities. Lineage is another important social institution of the Vedic times. It is defined as a corporate group of kins in unilateral relationship having a formal system of authority. These descent groups constitute a clan, and when several of them come together under a specific institution, this authority was known as a chief or a raja, for whom the term Grihapati is again used. Therefore, this system of clan also played a very important role in the political system of the Vedic society and was one of its pillars. So, learners, we have understood so far that in the early Vedic period and in the later Vedic period, there were changes in the social structure, and in the later Vedic period, the functions and role of all members in the society were much more clear compared to that of the early Vedic period. Now, let me take you to the protest against the ritualism that happened during this time period. It is probably an inherent character of a society that when we overemphasize on ritualism and we focus only on the privileges by a closed group, it leads to some kind of a protest. So, the Upanishads and the Iyankars, which were composed in between the periods of early and later Vedic society, had so much of rigid rules, and they were so cumbersome and had expensive sacrifices, which led to major protest by social groups. The challenges were related to the supremacy of Brahmanas and the Varna hierarchy. Interestingly, the authorship of the Upanishad is attributed primarily to the Kshatriyas, and as a result they were written in very simple language, and therefore they attained more popularity. Instead of ritualism, they emphasize abstract metaphysical principles and mystic meanings in reality. In some Upanishads, there are references about Brahmanas which indicate that they were not very useful for the society because they were considered to be taking lot of charity. The Upanishad protest had an influence on the post-Vedic society, and it led to changes in the type of relationship that emerged in households and also the various rituals that were performed during that time. After understanding this protest, now let us move to the third part of our discussion, which is related to post-Vedic society. We get historical records of post-Vedic society from 600 BC onwards. We are able to understand that from that point onwards, clans emerged as political institutions, and we had emergence of republics and monarchies. The institution of hereditary kings who were mostly Kshatriyas were representing the political power, and it emerged, and later on it consolidated itself into Mauryan Empire, which ushered in many significant changes in the social structure of society. The changes got further impetus with new revolutionary cultural and religious accomplishments and of Buddhism and Jainism. Both these religious movements constitute the core of the social and cultural protest against orthodox Brahminical emphasis on rituals and animal sacrifices. We have already learned that the seeds of such protest existed during the time of the Upanishads, but with the emergence of Buddhism and Jainism, it led to a radical departure in terms of the perspective of religion and society. Exponents of both Buddhism, such as Gautam Buddha, and Jainism, Mahavir, were Kshatriyas. Both placed great emphasis on non-violence and universal brotherhood. They rejected the Brahminical orthodoxy of caste, its social and cultural discrimination and ritualism. They had a worldwide view, and it led to a social movement which had its linkages with the economic, political and social structural changes that took place in the post-Vedic society. So, now let us study the various social and structural changes. The evidences regarding the post-Vedic society suggest that by this time social structure had undergone changes as a result of processes of social assimilation and interaction with host communities. The scale and integration and stratification of Aryan and non-Aryan groups into caste and class has substantially been enlarged. We have more complex and rigid systems in terms of hierarchy and inequality. A new class of Varna, which was known as untouchables, also emerged. They were basically representing people who lived their life by hunting and food gathering. It also implied that there was an existence of the notion of pollution purity in the rigid form of caste hierarchy. So, we find that there was a lot of intervarna mobility, and as a result of it, the overall caste system was based on the membership by birth. The complexity of the caste system was also accompanied by differentiation between the agricultural and the industrial mercantile economy. The surplus generated by these economies were channelized by states into urban centers, which led to emergence of small towns and cities. It also contributed to the differentiation among intellectual and cultural elite groups involved in art, craft and trade. It contributed to the emergence of cultural elite, and as a result of it, it challenged orthodoxy and growth of philosophical traditions in a number of ways in terms of ideas. So, we have studied so far that with the emergence of Buddhism and Jainism, there was a systematic impact on the social ideology. For the first of all, they rejected Vedic belief systems and rituals. Then second, they had followers who came from non-Brahminical strata. Number of Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras also comprised of their followers. So, all this led to a process of economic diversification, urbanization, increased social differentiation, which led to the growth of number of ideologies. However, it led to changes in the society and led to a lot of norms which were not very much equitable in terms of its approach. Due to these changes, there were a lot of impact that we can see on the occupational categories in terms of number of caste and class. We get some insight into this process through Kautilya's Arthashastra and Megasthenes, who was an ambassador to Mauryan court, in his work Indica. For example, Megasthenes refers to 7 castes that existed at this time. So, we can see that with the growth of economic changes and Jainism and Buddhism, a new set of change that took place, which can be linked to urbanism. So, it was a concept which provided the background for the movement of Grihapati into trades. So, earlier people were just basically householders or they were dependent on the agricultural income, but now we had the emergence of an urban class which had faith in the emerging new religion of Buddhism and Jainism. They patronized this religion, which led to an avenue for upward social mobility. We had changes in terms of the social norms and institutions. For example, the emergence of merchant and artisan guilds, system of commodification, introduction of coinage. So, all this led to a new social structure, institutions and adjustments. So, we find new set of classes, for example, philosophers, farmers, soldiers, artisans, counselors. So, they were basically occupational related rather than caste categories, and this led to a lot of social differentiation. In Arthashastra also we find a lot of reference related to caste and occupational categories, and we also mentioned the existence of the institution of some sort of a slavery, which is debatable. But yes, we are able to get an insight about the development of administrative class, commercial class and the growth of economic physical institutions during this time period. The urban centers played a very important role in the economic, administrative, cultural and political activities. We have evidences of urban rural migrations and economic interactions during this period. So, learners, we have studied in this that the family and the caste went through number of changes during this time period. There was an increased level of social differentiation. There were changes in the urban and agricultural occupational structure, which led to the change in the nature of caste and the Varna relationship. It had an impact on the traditional clan related social organization in both rural and urban community. And very important aspect related to the economic development in the urban centers was the concept of merchant guilds. These guilds were earlier based on caste structure. They not only functioned as economic institutions for production of trade and development of trade, but also as a political and cultural pressure group when occasions arose. They were based on strong business caste in cities. Many of them were followers of both religions such as Jainism and Buddhism. So, this period also marks the beginning of an overlapping relationship among the categories of caste and class and occupation in India. Merchant guilds and craft guilds are very much present today also, and they play a very vital role in the prevalent socio-economic structure. The various databases and the literary evidences found in the scriptures and text and archaeological findings tell us about cobblers guild, the oil miller guilds, potters guilds, weavers guild and number of such guilds. According to Kautilya, these guilds were capable of becoming center of power, and we all know that during the Mauryan Empire the roads and highways were well maintained and it led to increased mobility of men and merchandise. The state participated in agriculture and craft production. The government kept a record of trades and craft and related transactions. As a result of it, the state started interfering in the guild affairs. The state allocated guilds separate areas in the town for running their own trade and craft. The member of the tribal republics that had lost political power due to their incorporation in the Mauryan Empire also participated in economic activities. After the decline of Mauryan Empire, learners, you all know that it led to political disintegration and lack of control of state over guilds, allowing them better chances to grow. So, we have evidences from Sanchi, Bodh Gaya, Mathura and various sites of western Deccan, which refers to donations made by different artisans and traders. We have guilds of floor makers, weavers, oil millers, corn dealers, bamboo workers. So, we find them in various epigraphs, and this led to a closer commercial interaction with the Roman Empire, in which the Indian merchants earned huge profits. We have evidences from Manusmriti which shows that there is an increase in the authority of guilds when compared to the earlier periods. Epigraphic evidences of this period also refer to the act of charity by the guilds, and many of them also had a bank-like function. So, this was the scenario in the urban areas, and in the rural areas most of the population was still following the caste system, but there were changes due to this economic and political implications. The caste served as a unit of ritual and cultural reciprocities. So, as a result of it, we had the role of rituals. The caste organization served the purpose in the rural economy as the guild did in the cities. So, we had caste panchayats which used to handle the matters related to day family related issues in a particular village. So, we have studied in this video that in the rural areas there was a transition that took place. This transition was that various changes took place in the village community due to the migration of people in urban areas, and as a result of it the caste system was also affected. The functions and the family of system also responded to these changes. Due to the rise in the economic surplus both in the agrarian and the mercantile industrial economy, there was a tendency for maintaining large households such as joint families. The concept of land owning peasants increased. As a result of it, the position of the women also changed, and many of them also adopted Jainism and Buddhism to increase the scope of religious participation. Learners, in conclusion, I would like to say that it is important to keep in mind that the Vedic texts are vast and diverse, and they were written over an enormous time period. There are a number of differences that exist, and we have to understand the social perspective from the various events as well as the historical information that is available with us. We have studied in this video that yes, in the early Vedic period the caste system was different, whereas in the later Vedic period it became more complex. With the emergence of Buddhism and Jainism, we had new set of people from the lower caste adopting to these religions, and with the emergence of urban centers, there was a change in the relationship that existed between caste. Kingship changed and it was subject to a lot of challenges during this period. We had consolidation of the empires, as well as there was a change in the mode of communication in terms of social norms and values. New social hierarchy emerged, which was based on the economic principles and the concept of merchant guilds. So, we have understood from this video that in all the three phases, the early Vedic, later Vedic and post later Vedic period, social transformation took place in Indian society. Thank you so much.